We are the Muslim Ummah, and each day that goes by, the harder we try. In gratitude we pray to Allah. Chosen as part of the best of mankind, we spread the word of Islam. Every difficulty faced in our life makes us realize that it's just part of Allah's plan. Feeling stronger, we take it in our stride.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to our 5th episode of this exciting journey, the journey through our Islamic history, through the spread of Islam in the world. I'm Dr. Stef Keris, the author of The Forgotten Ottoman Heritage in Europe, the editor-in-chief of ilmonlinemac.com, and lecturer of several universities in Europe as well as in Africa. And I have focused a lot in my 20 years of being Muslim in the aspect of history. History, and not only Islamic history, but of course, being a Muslim, this was something that really attracted me very, very much, and still has been attracting me for the last couple of years. And I find it exciting to look into the way that Islam spread. I find it exciting to look into the way that our Muslim heroes, who are real heroes and not the made-up cartoon figures and whoever we think today or our children think that are heroes. So, mashallah, if we look at them and if we realize the importance of knowledge, and with knowledge is also it includes also history, knowledge of history, knowledge of our Islamic history, then we will understand, once we know that and we realize that, we will know how powerful this knowledge can be. Because we do have quite some Islamophobic elements out there, and not only in the Western world, but all over the world, who are trying to tell us that Islam spread with a sword, that Islam spread because of a lot of bloodshed, and that people were forced to accept Islam and to become Muslims. Now, I think that in the last 4 episodes I've made quite clear that that is not entirely true, that of course many battles happened, many battles were fought, and many people died on both sides. And of course, there were battles that had to do with conquering a certain country or conquering a certain region, no doubt about it. But the first and primary interest of the Muslims was definitely not for people to accept Islam. That was not something they were so interested in. Many of them accepted that they were Ahl al-Kitab. We have it in our deen. We are the ones who have it in our deen. It's not the Christians or the Jews. We are the ones who accept the Ahl al-Kitab, the Jews and the Christians alike. And we are the ones who give them rights and freedom. And this has been proven. And whoever doubts my words, no problem. There is a lot on the internet you can find. There is a lot that will change your mind in case you think that indeed Islam was spread by sword or Islam was spread because of the Muslims being so cruel and violent. Now, in this episode, I would like to go deeper into Asia. And after having looked into the spread of Islam in the Arabian Peninsula, Mecca, Medina, the Arabian Peninsula, which nowadays includes Saudi Arabia, Oman, Yemen, Qatar, Bahrain, going up to the nowadays Middle Eastern Sham area, which is Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and Palestine, as well as we spoke about Egypt, North Africa, up to Morocco. Now, I mentioned shortly that the Berbers from North Africa were the ones who exported, let's use that word, who exported Islam to Europe, with Tariq bin Ziyad being the first Muslim to set foot in Europe, in Spain, nowadays Gibraltar, which belongs to Britain nowadays. Now, all this area that we have been talking about, all this massive area, was all part of the Muslim Ummah within the time of the Umayyads, from the start of the rule of Medina, the Medinan rule, up to the Umayyads 750, before the Abbasids took over. The Umayyads, their capital was Damascus. The Umayyads are the ones who changed the capital from Medina into Damascus, and the Abbasids were the ones who changed from Damascus into Baghdad. If we go deeper into the further Middle East, going into Asia, talking about countries like Iraq and Iran, both countries have a common history in many ways. Now, with regards to Iraq, of course, Baghdad. Nobody will underestimate the power of Baghdad, will underestimate the power of the Abbasids, and the way that they built out the city made it a center for Islam, Islamic knowledge during their reign, during the reign of the Abbasids, who took over after the Umayyads, 750 up to the 13th century. Now, the Abbasids played an important role, not only in Iraq and in Baghdad, but throughout the Muslim world. Baghdad became a center of knowledge, as Damascus was. In a way, it still stayed, but there was a rivalry between the Umayyads and the Abbasids. And after the Umayyads lost their role to the Abbasids, they fled basically to Spain, to Al-Andalus, to the Iberian Peninsula. And that's where the Umayyads still established their caliphate until the end of their rule in Spain, in Granada, the last city to fall in Spain from the Muslims. So the Muslims lost the city in the 15th century. So basically, the Abbasids take over power in the Middle East, in the Sham area, taken over up to Iraq, taken over power even up to Iran. An interesting phenomenon in this case, Iran, as we know it nowadays, was very different that time. Persia, as it was known in ancient time, ancient Persia had a specific religion. And this religion was the religion of Zoroastrianism. Zoroastrianism, where fire was worshipped, where people had a specific idea of their deity, and was not, it's very difficult to explain if it was now part of the Ahl al-Kitab or not. The scholars, certain scholars say basically that it's difficult to explain exactly what part of religion this was, because fire was worshipped in a way, so it's difficult to put them under the Ahl al-Kitab. They were not Jews, they were not Christians, Zoroastrians. And it was an ancient religion, and that was the main religion of Iran. And it took the Muslims quite some time to get the population to understand Islam in Iran, and many of the Zoroastrians, many of the followers of that religion, remained the ones who were in rural areas, simply because when the Arab garrisons and the Arab forces went into nowadays Iraq, Iran, they were the ones that went mainly to the urban centers, urban areas, and that's where in the cities Islam spread much, much faster than it spread in the rural areas of that particular region. So that in the end, the rural areas became known as Zoroastrian areas, and the cities became Muslim or Islamic. That time there was no division between Sunni and Shia, so we don't have something, the problem that we have nowadays, we didn't have at that time, of course. This all happened later. The Iranians, the Persian Iranians, they basically, not only after they accepted Islam, not only lived as Muslims, but they also spread Islam further into Asia in such a way that their language influenced Central Asian groups and tribes, and especially Turkish tribes. We should not forget that during that time, during the 12th, the 13th, the 14th century, there were Turkish tribes, the Seljuks as well as the Ottomans in the 13th century, who were coming as dynasties over from Central Asia, nowadays basically area of China, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan. These areas you know, the Turkish tribes were moving towards Minor Asia, which is nowadays known as the country of Turkey. So these Turkish tribes, that some of them had established already themselves in Central Asia, some of them moved away from there and moved towards Minor Asia. Some of them accepted Islam through the hands of the Iranians, Persians, the same as northern Afghanistan, for example. People in northern Afghanistan accepted Islam easily through the Umayyad efforts, through the Umayyads, but of course they came from Iran. It's important to see that the people who accepted Islam in Central Asia were heavily influenced by Iranian philosophy, by the Iranian language, Farsi, Persian, and they accepted Islam with the Persian element in there, the Persian touch, let's call it that way. And we have to see that it played an important role in their development also within Islam. So that Arabic played a role, of course. I mean, we all pray in Arabic, the adhan is in Arabic, everything, but Arabic was the religious language, yes, but Iranian Farsi became the cultural language. We should not forget that during the time of the Ottomans, for example, the Turkish dynasty that I was speaking about, basically one of them, the Ottomans, when they accepted Islam, their major language was not Arabic, neither Arabic nor Turkish. It was Farsi, Persian. And even the poetry that time, or anything that was artistic, was actually written in Farsi, in Persian, Iranian language. And that played an important role for the development of Islam as well, for the development of Persian culture in that area. Until nowadays, Afghanis basically speak an Iranian dialect, or one of the languages that's spoken in Afghanistan is Persian. The Turkish tribes that accepted Islam, again, there was no division between Sunni and Shia at that time, and they exported Sunni Islam. Within many of the zealots, within many of the Muslim, let's call them missionaries, or da'is, actually it's a better word to use the Arabic word, the Muslim missionaries coming from the area of Iran, Iraq, there were many Sufis who had taken it upon them, saw it as their task to wander around Central Asia and spread their version of Islam, their Sufi Islam, towards the Central Asian republics, nowadays Central Asian republics, the Turkish tribes and the Turkic people. We have a lot of stories, and not only stories, but we have a lot of authentic sources talking about zealous missionary work, and I'm quoting one of the sources. Zealous missionary work of the Samanid rulers, as many as 30,000 tens of Turks accepted Islam, and later under the Ghaznavids the number of converts increased even more. Now there is such a massive effort coming from the Sufi type of Islam, that they spread their type of Islam very quickly throughout Central Asia and throughout the Turkic tribes. And it went so fast, basically, that as the example mentioned, one of the examples, 30,000 tens of Turks accepted Islam within no time. Now, we will go a little bit deeper into this issue, inshallah, after the break, inshallah, and I hope that the knowledge that you're gaining, you will be able to share with your children, inshallah. And Jazakumullahu khair, and I'll see you after the break. Assalamu alaikum.
We are the Muslim Ummah, and each day that goes by, the harder we try. In gratitude we pray to Allah.
Welcome to Tech Talk. I'm your host, Omar Shear. This season of Tech Talk, we will focus specifically on the internet.
A student would type their paper, and instead of handing me a hard copy of their paper, they would upload it to this learning system, this e-learning system.
I have some great experience when it comes to technology, and in particular, internet technology. Call to action is something that we do in our day-to-day lives, and maybe we don't realize it. Now we want to discuss, after you have a product and you have a website and you have a way to communicate with your customers, which would be your email marketing system, now it's time to take the money from the customer.
The Muslim Ummah, and each day that goes by, the harder we try. In gratitude we pray to Allah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome back to the second part of the fifth episode, going into the areas of Iran, Iraq, Central Asia, the Turkic tribes, which all played a role, all had something to do with each other. We mentioned the importance that Islam gained after the Iranians accepted Islam, and how they also exported not only Islam but also their language towards Central Asia and to the Turkic tribes. And by the way, there's not just one Turkish tribe or two or three, but there were thousands of them, and many of these Turkic tribes accepted Islam. Many of them went under the Ottoman dynasty and became part of the Ottoman dynasty later in the 13th century, which we're going to mention, inshallah, later again when we talk about the Ottomans and the Turks, inshallah. Now, so again, as you mentioned before, the Zoroastrians, who were the ones who were following the religion of their ancestors, Zoroastrianism in Iran, they, in the centers and in the cities, they were the ones who readily accepted Islam. It took them a while, but it was faster. The spread of Islam within the cities was faster than within the rural areas. And the Zoroastrian understanding of the religion had a lot to do with worshipping the fire. And some of them could easily see the connection between, of course, worshipping Allah and worshipping something that was created, that was there. So they could see that that cannot be. So alhamdulillah, many of them accepted Islam. And also we said that many of the zealot Muslims, especially the ones who started practicing a Sufi type of Islam, were the ones who were quite zealous in going into Afghanistan, the area of Afghanistan, Central Asia, coming across Turkic tribes, and basically them accepting the Sufi type of, the Sufi branch of Islam very easily, very quickly. The Turkic tribes that came wandering down towards nowadays Minor Asia, these Turkic tribes belonged to another type of religion, and they were not Zoroastrians, but they were shamanists. So the shamanists were a kind of group or a kind of religion which believed in ancestry, in ancestry worship. They believed in using jinns for their purposes. So it was a quite complicated issue for many of them, leaving this kind of practice for accepting pure Islam, Tawheed, and Islam as we understand it nowadays, Islam, the Tawheed of Allah, the one believing in the oneness of Allah, and leaving everything else that has nothing to do with it aside. So until nowadays, unfortunately, we will be able to find in many Central Asian countries, including Turkey, we'll be able to find quite some Muslim shamanists, if you allow me this kind of grouping, which of course obviously is not possible, but there are people who kept the shamanist roots and officially declare themselves being Muslims, which is impossible, of course, but they practice a lot of shamanist, they mixed up shamanist rules with Islamic rules. The Iranians and the Samanids, the dynasty coming from Iran, propagated Sunni Islam, we should not forget this, as I mentioned before, didn't have the division of Sunni and Shia yet, so the Islam that was propagated in general was a Sunni type of Islam, and a mix of Islamo-Persian culture. So their language was given through. Now, again, next to this one, as we said, quite many Sufi missionaries or Sufi da'is, whatever you want to call them, many Sufi da'is took it upon themselves to wander around Central Asian tribes and villages and basically tell people about their branch of Islam, which they willingly accepted, mashallah. Now, in modern-day Kazakhstan, and I said mashallah just to make this clear also, I said mashallah for accepting Islam, not necessarily for accepting the Sufi branch of Islam. The Sufi branch of Islam is a deviation from the real Islam, as we all ought to know. Now, Kazakhstan, as I said before, I mentioned the Central Asian republics. Many of them are in Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan. These are all parts of the former Soviet Union. And when they became independent after the Soviet Union collapsed, when they became independent, they also, or many of these people there, started realizing and going back to their roots, going back to their Islamic or Sufi roots. And nowadays there is even a significant number of reawakened, let's call them that way, reawakened Muslims. And alhamdulillah, the Islam is spreading, as far as I know, also by sources and by people who are from there, authentic sources, that basically Islam is spreading also in that area even nowadays. But it was there before, it was there during the time of the Abbasids, and even the Umayyads had the chance to spread it further. So, at the very beginning of the spread of Islam, Islam went definitely up to Central Asia. The Turkic tribes were affected. Areas and countries like nowadays Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, where, if you want to use the word Islamists, became Muslims, became Islamic. A very important point to mention here again, next to the issue that I mentioned about the Persian language, it became such an important language that people indeed started using rather Persian than Arabic for their artistic skills, using the artistic skills, for example, poetry, drawings, and so on. Everything had a Persian touch in it. And whoever has the chance to travel through Central Asia, mashallah, if you can, go and see the fantastic architecture and fantastic artistic background that can be found there. Mashallah, is beautiful. And the Persian language was used to basically propagate Islam and also to use artistic skills. Now, the translation of the Quran in Persian occurred during the reign of the Samanids in the 9th century. In the 9th century already, their first complete translation of the Quran occurred, and that, of course, gave them, the people there, more the chance to go on with something in their hands and show the Quran in their language and properly propagate Islam basically in that way. The Central Asian republics, the Turkic tribes, including, of course, the Iranians and the people from the area of Iraq and Iran, they all, after they accepted Islam, and basically there is nowadays, as far as I'm aware, not a lot of traces of Zoroastrianism. As far as I'm aware, there's not a lot practice of this ancient religion. But we know that the Iranians nowadays, mostly what they propagate is the Shia Islam. And in Iraq, we will find quite some groups that are divided. We will find Shia, we will find Sunni, of course, and we will find other groups and other sects in Iraq which have developed, especially in that area. Now, it's a question why this happened. I just challenge you, if you want to find out more about it, just find out, just go and read some more, find out. There are a lot of books online, even there are e-books online. There are a lot of books you can find in the library about the spread of Islam in Central Asia, the influence that the Iranian culture and the Iranian language has had on the people in Central Asia, and why for a long time Iranian was even considered more important than Arabic. Arabic was basically just used for the salah, for the prayer, and that was it. After this, everything else was conducted in Farsi, Persian, Iranian language. Why it is important what we're mentioning here is simply because we have to understand that before this big division happened, as we know nowadays, before the big Gulf Wars that clearly divided the Shia from the Sunni in that area, we need to understand that that was not like this, and that officially the Islam what was given through from the Iranian side was actually a Sunni Islam. And we have nowadays, for that reason, we have nowadays a lot of Afghanis and Turks and many people from the Central Asian republics that actually are Sunni and not Shia. The only real Shia country in Central Asia is Azerbaijan. And in Azerbaijan you will find quite a big Shia it's a Shia country, basically, with a Sunni minority. Even during the time of the Ottomans, they were fighting the Shia, and in such a way that they called themselves defender of Sunni Islam. During the time of the Ottomans, you will find a lot of sultans who basically fought the Shia in such a way that they would call and give themselves names like the Sunni defenders of Islam. Why is it important to know about Iraq? Simply because Baghdad, we should not forget, Baghdad played such an important role. It was the third biggest capital in the Muslim world, after Medina, of course, and after the Umayyads, after Damascus. Baghdad played such an important role. It became a center of knowledge. It became the center of knowledge for the Muslim world for quite some centuries, starting in 750, 753, up to the 13th century. Until then, in the end, the power was given away from the Arabs this time. Now it became a Turkish type of affected Islam from that time on, inshallah. After the 13th century, the Seljuks, the Ottomans took over, and they, from that time on, had left the Arab powers, the Arabs behind. And inshallah, with this one, I would like to close and finish this episode, which finishes basically now in the far eastern part of the Middle East, basically going into Asia. And inshallah, we'll find out more about Islam in Asia, especially going up to Indonesia and Malaysia, which I personally find a very interesting area. Inshallah, in the next episodes, follow us, inshallah, and I hope I will see you very soon. Jazakumullahu khair for your interest. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
We are the Muslim Ummah, and each day that goes by, the harder we try. In gratitude we pray to Allah. Chosen as part of the best of mankind, we spread the word of Islam. Every difficulty faced in our lives makes us realize that it's just part of Allah's plan. Feeling stronger, we take it in our stride. We are the Muslim Ummah, and each day that goes by, the harder we try. In gratitude we pray to Allah. Chosen as part of the best of mankind, we spread the word of Islam. Every difficulty faced in our life